Hi everyone and welcome back to Weena Wonders. If it's your first time joining us, hello, I'm Weena. I hope you enjoy your time on this channel. So today I'm going to be doing my May reading wrap-up and I'm kind of stressed right now, not gonna lie, because I actually already filmed this video last Tuesday, but as I was exporting today and getting ready to edit, I accidentally deleted all of the footage. So now I am here re-recording this with you guys, so please bear with me. I'm pretty proud of my progress in the month of May because it's just a huge step up from reading like 1 to 2 books a month to finally being able to put together like a good TBR and get through a good number of books and spend some leisurely time crying my heart out to some Maggie Nelson. And yeah, I'm just super excited to be back on the ball with my reading and to discuss with you all of these awesome books. So the first book that I read in the month of May was Funny Weather, Art in an Emergency by Olivia Laing. These are essays on art and the lives of artists, and not gonna lie, my first hesitation when I kind of got into this book is, will I know enough about art to fully appreciate what this book is talking about? I was a little bit scared that it would be a little bit too esoteric for me, or that it would go in depth into kind of the nuances of visual art that I'm not necessarily familiar with exploring, and I just wanted something that would be refreshing and something that would be a good break from critical theory, in the sense that it could be about something that would kind of spark this creative fire in me as opposed to sharpen my critical eye. And I know that those two things aren't always mutually exclusive, but sometimes, you know, you just need a good break. And oh my gosh, like, this book did not disappoint. I was completely wrong in fearing that, and I think that this is the kind of book that anyone can appreciate as long as you are interested in living a creative life, in being curious, in kind of observing the world around you in this way that sees the way that we are all interconnected. And the thing that I really loved about this book is that in the introduction, Olivia Laing says that something she was interested in when she was reading this was how to conduct a reparative reading as opposed to a paranoid reading. And she says that a paranoid reading kind of demonizes the element of surprise, and that's something that has sort of taken over our culture in general, where, for example, we are obsessed with knowing about conspiracy theories or knowing the true intentions behind like what a politician is saying, because we often mistake not being caught off guard by that deception as actually finding a solution for the things that need to be addressed, and they're not necessarily the same thing. So she says that the thing about paranoid readings is that they make you feel hopeless, they fill you with despair, and they don't really arrive at any solution, because you leave that reading feeling more depressed and more hopeless, and like you can't do anything with the small bit of power that you have in your own life as an individual person. More so, I think, if you're from the Philippines or any other like third world country. And she says that a reparative reading, on the other hand, yes, it still acknowledges all of those things, and it still does what art does, which is to disturb the comforted or the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. But the plus side there is that it shows you multiple avenues for acting, and the thing that it sort of hinges on is a willingness to explore and to be curious, and not that nothing is surprising. And she says that reparative art can also be surprising in how much it contributes to that fire of creativity and how much it can inspire you to want to do something. And if I were to sum up this book in a nutshell, I will say that it's very inspiring. She talks about a lot of artists whose work I did not even know about before coming into this book, and she talks about a lot of experiences that I will never experience as someone who lives in a third world country, and as someone who I guess is not like as well traveled or as well versed as her, but there's just something really, really beautiful about the way that she wrote it. This book, I feel, is a book that feels inclusive and which feels like it's willing to meet you halfway, which I really enjoy. It doesn't pander to you, but it also doesn't alienate you. It doesn't feel like the book or the author or the persona conjured by the author is talking down to you in any way at all. And I think that in itself, in its attempt to kind of talk about reparative readings, it is a reparative reading. And a lot of the books that I'm reading now actually kind of were inspired by this, or are stuff by authors or artists that she mentioned here. So I'll talk about that next month though. But yeah, this is just a really, really good book. And I think I'll read a small excerpt from it. So here she's talking about an artist called Philip Guston. And basically he painted some very disturbing paintings that were also kind of a commentary on society at the time. And she's talking about a conversation that Guston had with Morton Feldman at the New York Studio School. So I'll just read this quote for you guys. He'd been thinking a lot about the Holocaust, he said, especially about the extermination camp Treblinka. It worked the mass killing, he told Feldman, because the Nazis deliberately induced numbness on both sides, in the victims and also the tormentors. And yet, a small group of prisoners had managed to escape. Imagine what a process it was to unnumb yourself, to see it totally and to bear witness, he said. That's the only reason to be an artist, to escape, to bear witness to this. He didn't mean escape as in run away from reality. He meant act. He meant unspring the trap. He meant cut through the wire. It's so freaking beautiful, and I think it's such a good way to describe that fine line between escapism as something bad, as in literally running away from your problems, and escapism as a way to escape the trap that we've all been put in. And chef's kiss. I would highly, highly recommend it. So I mentioned also that a lot of the books that I read after that were sort of inspired by the people that she wrote about. And the next author of this book that I am going to talk about is someone who I have read from before, and I've talked about her a lot on this channel before, but Olivia Laing also mentions Maggie Nelson. And the book that she particularly cites is one that I haven't really read before. So she was talking about the book Argonauts, which is creative nonfiction from Maggie, but creative nonfiction in the long form. So before, I'd read Bluets, and I'd read some of her poetry also in Something Bright Than Holes, but those are all in the short form. They're very lyrical, and so I was interested in seeing how Maggie Nelson would take that and translate it into the long form. Because sometimes there are authors who do really, really well in the short form, like Lydia Davis, but reading them in the long form is a whole other matter. Where I really, really loved Lydia Davis's short stuff, but when I stepped into the world of the end of the story, I was just like, Lydia, just spit it out. Like, tell me what you mean. So I was kind of worried, but also morbidly interested in how that might be the case with Maggie Nelson. So I picked up Argonauts and I read it on my trusty old iPad. So I guess I'll just insert like a picture of the cover here. And I think that this book is the best thing that I've ever read from Maggie Nelson. And I was pleasantly surprised. I feel like she's the kind of person who actually does better in the long form because she can expound on different things that she's referencing. She talks a lot about philosophy. She talks about Wittgenstein, who I'm so happy that I read about in my critical theory class, and she just this book is so good. So before I get carried away, this book is a memoir. And in particular, she is talking about the period in her life where she marries her partner, Harry, who is a trans man, and she gets pregnant with her child, and then it ends as she gives birth to her child. And this book is just so freaking beautiful. Like, it's a meditation on the experience of being alive. I think that's mainly the way that I can describe this without limiting the things that it's about. Because I think to say that this book is just about, you know, starting a family, or just about queerness, or just about LGBTQ+ rights is severely oversimplifying it. I think that this book meditates on the crass and the cruel and the bloody, visceral part of being alive, but it also really pushes you to think about the other things that exist, like in the mind, in the heart, the things that you can empathize with people about. And in turn also the boundaries and limitations of things like empathy. When is enough enough? What is the kind of life you want to lead? And it's just so beautiful, and I loved seeing this perspective on art and this perspective on motherhood. You know, I'm not the kind of person who wants to have kids. Like, it's just never been something that I've been interested in, aside from watching Gilmore Girls and being like, hey, I could raise like a kid to be my best friend, which is completely selfish and narcissistic, but you know, I was 12 at the time, so what did I know? But yeah, motherhood has never been something appealing to me, but there's something about the way that Maggie Nelson writes about it where I can appreciate why people would find motherhood to be like this beautiful, enriching, just wonderful experience. And that's not something that I've felt reading a lot of books in the past. I feel like the only other book that I read which conveyed that to me, which is probably not a very hopeful example, is The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, where she talks about her daughter Quintana. So yeah, this book was just so beautiful, and I want to sort of read a little bit from it. So the part that I want to read is, hold on, why are iPads so big? Like, gotta swipe. Okay, so the part that I want to read is where she's talking about giving birth and pain and the experience of pain. So this is what she says. If all goes well, the baby will make it out alive, and so will you. Nonetheless, you will have touched death along the way. You will have realized that death will do you too, without fail and without mercy. It will do you even if you don't believe it will do you, and it will do you in its own way. There's never been a human that it didn't. I guess I'm just waiting to die, your mother said, bemused and incredulous. The last time we saw her, her skin so thin in her borrowed bed. People say women forget about the pain of labor, due to some kind of God-given amnesia that keeps the species reproducing. But that isn't quite right. After all, what does it mean for pain to be memorable? You're either in pain or you're not, and it isn't the pain that one forgets. It's the touching death part. As the baby might say to its mother, might we say to death, I forget you, but you remember me. I wonder if I'll recognize it when I see it again. Like, what the actual F, Maggie Nelson? How could you do this to me? How could you be such a darn genius with words? It's just... Needless to say, I would 100% recommend this book, and I think, yeah, I think it's one of those books that I'm going to keep on rereading as I get older. After Argonauts, I kind of wanted a break, and I didn't feel like sobbing for 2 more days on end, so I decided to pick up a middle grade book that was recommended to me by my friend Jasper. So that's The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This is a middle grade book, and it does incorporate a lot of fantasy elements, so I really enjoyed that, and I was very much looking forward to that. Basically, this book is set in an alternate version of England where there are kids who have magical powers, and these kids are largely marginalized by the government. So they're viewed as dangerous, they're viewed as threats to security, and as a result, they're kind of shipped off to these orphanages, and that term orphanage is kind of a misnomer because actually no one adopts these kids. And these orphanages are really just houses for them where they can stay and the government can keep tabs on them. Our protagonist in this book is named Linus Baker, and basically Linus is a social worker, and it's his job to check on the orphanages, inspect them, and then give his recommendation on whether or not they should be kept open. So Linus in this book kind of reminds me of Harold Crick from Stranger Than Fiction, where he lives a very routinary life and he doesn't really think about purpose. He doesn't really think about what it is that he wants for himself or the kind of life that he wants. The only thing on his mind is, does he do the job well? is he performing at work, and even at the beginning of the book you can really see how fleshed out that sense of dread and like machination is. And his world gets turned upside down as it goes in these books when he's suddenly assigned to a top secret assignment or inspection. He's sent off to a small town that's at the edge of the sea or the ocean, and he sees the water for the first time, and part of him is terrified but also thrilled, and the thrill kind of grows as he meets the kids in this orphanage. So the reason why they're far out, or they're so far at the end of like England, is that the kids here are not your typical magical kids. So just to give you an idea of the scale of the kinds of kids that are here, one of them is the Antichrist, and his name is Lucifer, aka Lucy for short. And I think the biggest threat really to Linus's sense of security and sense of knowing the way that things should turn out is when he meets Arthur Parnassus, who is the headmaster of this orphanage. Arthur is like a really hot educator. He's like a tall drink of water, he's super smart, he loves philosophy, he's gentle, he's kind, and he has an education philosophy that is very foreign to Linus, in the sense that Arthur believes that no matter what your destiny is or what you were destined to do, you can still do something to change that. So in the case of Lucy, even if Lucy was destined to become the Antichrist, and even if he has these like crazy dreams about the apocalypse and stuff, Arthur treats him like any other child and nurtures that part of him which could grow to be good and which wants to be good and which is also sensitive and vulnerable. And that's kind of the philosophy that he applies. And as Linus stays in this place, slowly the kids and Arthur kind of grow on him, and I'm not gonna spoil the rest, but at the end of it, like, he is just driven to make decisions that he wouldn't have normally made, and it's a beautiful story of character development. So I really like this book. I liked how it was written, I liked the atmosphere that was conjured, I loved the characters. Arthur Parnassus is just, he's so hot, and I really love the kids also. I like their different personalities. I think the only criticism that I would have for this book is that at some point it gets very heavy-handed with the message that it wants to convey, which is that yes, like, diversity is a good thing, it's good for us to accept people no matter their backgrounds, and you kind of get that already from the first few chapters, but there are times really where some of the characters say things and it's like they're just a megaphone for the author to be like, diversity is good for you, like, you shouldn't discriminate against people. And that's fine. I would have rather this, that it's a little bit heavy-handed, than have it be underrepresented anyway. So it's not really a minus against the book, it's just something that I feel could be distracting at times, and sometimes just pulled you out of the plot, where you're like enjoying this scene and everything's great and well written, and then suddenly, by the way, this is no way to treat people. And so I just found that sometimes that would jar me, and I'd be like, am I reading a PSA? But that said, it was overall a very good book, and I would still highly recommend it, and I think as far as middle grade and fantasy go, it's something worth checking out. Okay, so last on this list is Riding Westward by Carl Phillips. This is a collection of poems, and the thing about Carl Phillips and similar authors like Richard Seiken is that I think there was a point in time where this kind of poetry was very refreshing, especially if you were used to work that was a little bit more formalist, work that kind of took itself very seriously, at least in terms of image, continuity, line cuts, etc. But nowadays, I don't know, I find myself kind of approaching a threshold at which I think I can appreciate these kinds of poems without feeling a little bit tired or umay. And I think that's kind of what happened to me with this collection, where the poems are really beautiful and I really enjoyed them, but I just found some of them tiring, or I felt like I'd read this poem before because the register is so familiar and so distinctly Carl Phillips. But that said, it was still a very good book. It fixates on lover as raptor. like a dinosaur. So lover as a raptor, lover as someone that can also be vicious. And it does deal with some themes of sexual abuse and abuse within a relationship, but it does it in a way that's very meditative, and which really shows you how difficult it is to get out of that situation, because intimacy and hatred, violence and love are just so enmeshed together. So yes, I still think this was a beautiful poetry collection. It's just that if you've read some Carl Phillips before, I'm not sure if this would be like the most urgent thing that you need to read right now. But that said, I'll leave you guys with a poem from this. Affliction by Carl Phillips. The raptor's face hovers over my face. I've let risk sustain me this far before. I raise one arm, two arms, the bird circles. Chance entirely how our gestures fall into something now and then mistakable for rough pattern. I like chance. I like how the markings at his neck suggest the hand of an amateur, as if someone had traced uncertainly an outline in rust around the shadow of a pair of wings only half through. Unfurling there, fixed there, as if by the outline itself, in that position the strangest scar. Other differences between us include my ability to hold in check briefly all my usual will to conquer, which in the raptor is the will to survive. I cast it elsewhere. When I do, an ability to feel sorrow, I don't know why, replaces it, to feel sorrow for some other creature. Not the sorrow of it, which would be compassion. The raptor hovers over me, as if lifted on an impossible cross between steady updraft and a sense of restraint. Tight circles, each one higher than the last, farther from me, though I can see his face still. I recognize it, with what I think must look almost like tenderness from so far away. Bada bing, bada boom. Carl Phillips, everyone. Okay. Alright, so that's it for my May reading wrap up. I hope that you guys have had a really good reading month as well. Please let me know what you read this month, and if you've read any of these books. If you have some recommendations for things to read, I would also love to hear them. I'll be back soon with another video, and please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already. Yeah. Bye.